You'll be happy to know that I'll be talking not about my own tragedy, but other people's tragedy. It's a lot easier to be lighthearted about other people's tragedy than your own, and I want to keep in the spirit of the conference. So if you believe the media accounts, being a drug dealer in the height of the crack cocaine epidemic was a very glamorous life, in the words of Virginia Pastrell. There was money, there was drugs, guns, women, you name it, jewelry, bling bling, it had it all. Okay? What I'm here to tell you today is that, in fact, based on 10 years of research, a unique opportunity to go inside a gang, to see the actual books, the financial records of the gang, that the answer turns out not to be that being in the gang was a glamorous life, but I think more realistically, that being in a gang, selling drugs for a gang, is perhaps the worst job in all of America. And that's what I'd like to convince you of today. Okay, so there are three things I want to do. First, I want to explain how and why crack cocaine had such a profound influence on inner city gangs. Secondly, I want to tell you how somebody like me came to be able to see the inner workings of a gang. It's an interesting story, I think. And then third, I want to tell you in a very superficial way about some of the things we found when we actually got to look at the financial records, the books of the gang. Okay, so before I do that, just one warning, which is that this presentation has been rated R by the Motion Picture Association of America. It contains adult themes, adult language. Given who's up on the stage, you'll be delighted to know that, in fact, there'll be no nudity, barring a unexpected wardrobe malfunctions aside. Okay. So let me start by talking about crack cocaine and how it transformed the gang. Okay, and to do that, you have to actually go back to a time before crack cocaine in the early 80s and look at it from the perspective of a gang leader. Okay, so being a gang leader in the inner city wasn't such a bad deal in the mid-'80s, the early 80s, let me say. Now, you had a lot of power, you got to beat people up, you got a lot of prestige, a lot of respect. But the thing is, there was no money in it. Okay? The gang had no way to make money. You couldn't charge dues to the people in the gang because the people in the gang didn't have any money. You couldn't really make any money selling marijuana. Marijuana's too cheap, it turns out. There's just no market for being. You can't get rich selling marijuana. You couldn't sell cocaine. Cocaine's a great product, powder cocaine, but you got to know rich white people. And most of the inner city gang members didn't know any rich white people. They couldn't sell to that market. You couldn't really do petty crime either. It turns out petty crime's a terrible way to make a living. So as a result, as a gang leader, you had, power. It's a pretty good life. But the thing was, in the end, you were living at home with your mother. And so it wasn't really a career. There was something that, there were limits to how powerful and important you could be if you had to live at home with your mother. Okay. Then along comes crack cocaine. Okay? And in the words of Malcolm Gladwell, crack cocaine was the extra chunky version of tomato sauce for the inner city. Okay? Because crack cocaine was an unbelievable innovation. I don't have time to talk about it today. But if you think about it, I would say that in the last 25 years, of every invention or innovation that's occurred in this country, the biggest one in terms of impact on the well-being of people who live in the inner city was crack cocaine. Okay? It's for the worse, not for the better, but for the worse. It had a huge impact on life. So what was it about crack cocaine? It was a brilliant way of getting the brain high. Okay? Because you could smoke crack cocaine and you can smoke crack cocaine, you can't smoke powder cocaine, and smoking is a much more efficient mechanism of delivering a high than is snorting it. And it turned out there was this audience that didn't know it wanted crack cocaine, but when it came, it really did. And it was a perfect drug you could sell buy the cocaine that went in for $1, sell it for $5, highly addictive. The high was very short. So for 15 minutes, you get this great high. And then when you come down, all you want to do is get high again. Okay? It created a wonderful market. And for the people who were there running the gang, it was a great way, seemingly, to make a lot of money, at least for the people on the top. Okay, so this is where we enter the picture. Not really me. I'm really a bit player in all this. My co-author, Sudhir Venkatesh, is the main character. Okay? So he was a math major in college who had a good heart and decided he wanted to get a sociology PhD, came to the University of Chicago. So the 3 months before he came to Chicago, he had spent following the Grateful Dead. And in his own words, he looked like a freak. Okay? He's a South Asian, very dark-skinned South Asian, big man, and he had hair, in his words, down to his ass. Okay? Defied all kinds of boundaries. Was he black or white? Was he man or woman? It was really a curious sight to be seen. So he showed up at the University of Chicago, and the famous sociologist William Julius Wilson was doing a book that involved surveying people all across Chicago. And he took one look at Sadir, who was going to go do some surveys for him, and decided he knew exactly the place to send him, which was to one of the toughest, most notorious housing projects, not just in Chicago, but in the entire United States. So Sadir, the suburban boy who'd never really been in the inner city, dutifully took his clipboard and, walked down to this housing project, gets to the first building. The first building, well, there's nobody there, but he hears some voices up in the stairwell. So he climbs up the stairwell, and he comes around the corner and finds a group of young African-American men playing dice. Okay. This is about 1990, peak of the crack epidemic. This is a very dangerous job, being in a gang. You don't like to be surprised. You don't like to be surprised by people coming around the corner, and the mantra was, shoot first, ask questions later. Okay. Now, Sadir was lucky. He was such a freak, and that clipboard probably saved his life, because he figured no other rival gang member would be coming up to shoot at them with a clipboard. So his greeting was not particularly warm, but they did say, well, okay, let's hear your questions on your survey. So I kid you not, the first question on the survey that he was sent to ask was, how do you feel about being born black in America? Makes you wonder about academics, okay? Well, so the choices of answers were very good, bad, and very bad. What Sadir found out is, in fact, that the real answer was the following. The survey was not, in the end, going to be what got Sadir off the hook. He was held hostage overnight in the stairwell. There was a lot of gunfire. There were a lot of philosophical discussions he had with the gang members. By morning, the gang leader arrived, checked out Sadir, decided he was no threat, and they'd let him go home. So Sadir went home, took a shower, took a nap, and you and I, probably faced with this situation, would think, well, I guess I'm going to write my dissertation on the Grateful Dead. I've been following for the last 3 months. Sadir, on the other hand, got right back, walked down to the housing project, went up to the second floor, and said, hey guys, I had so much fun hanging out with you last night, I wonder if I could do it again tonight. And that was the beginning of what turned out to be a beautiful relationship that involved Sadir living in the housing project on and off for 10 years, hanging out in crack houses, going to jail with the gang members, having the car window shot out of his car, having the police break into his apartment, steal his computer disks, you name it. But ultimately, the story has a happy ending for Sadir, who became one of the most respected sociologists in the country, and especially for me, as I sat in my office with my Excel spreadsheet open, waiting for Sadir to come and deliver to me the latest load of data that he would get from the gang. It was one of the most unequal co-authoring relationships ever, but I was glad to be the beneficiary of it. Okay, so what do we find? What do we find in the gang? Well, let me say one thing. So what we got, we really got access to everybody in the gang. We got an inside look at the gang from the very bottom up to the very top. They trusted Sadir in ways that really no academic has ever, or really anybody, any outsider has ever earned the trust of these gangs. To the point where they actually opened up, for what was most interesting for me, is their books, their financial records that they kept, and they made them available to us. And we not only could study them, but we could ask them questions about what was in them. So if I have to kind of summarize very quickly in the short time I have what the sort of the bottom line of what I take away from the gang is that if I had to draw a parallel between the gang and any other organization, it would be that the gang is just like McDonald's, okay, in a lot of different respects, the restaurant McDonald's. Okay, so first, in one way, which isn't maybe the most interesting way, but it's a good way to start, is in the way it's organized, the hierarchy of game, the way it looks. So here's what the org chart of the gang looks like. I don't know if any of you know very much about org charts, but if you were to kind of strip down and simplify McDonald's org chart, this is exactly what the org chart would look like. Now, it's amazing, but the top level of the gang, they actually call themselves the board of directors. Okay? And Sudir says,